This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello and welcome to round 20 at the Formula One World Championship of 2022. It's the fiesta that is Mexico City, and it's such a great race. We've had great race after great race after great race, atmosphere, food, drama, and it all boils over in Mexico City. Jack Nicholls, Jolyon Palmer and Andrew Benson, all of us are going to give a quick insight into the world of Christian Horner, Red Bull and what's happened, because we finally have a ruling from the FIA. Jack Nicholls, I'll come to you first.
$7 million fine and a 10% reduction on their aero development that they're allowed each year. So that effectively is 7% less in the grand scheme of things. So if Williams get 100% of testing time, Red Bull were due to get 70%. They will now get 63%. Going into next season. So that is the penalty, and look, it's basically what was anticipated, right? There were plenty in Austin last weekend. Everybody's throwing around different things, but and what they thought should happen, and everybody had their own opinion on that. But broadly speaking, a fine and a development reduction was what we expected. Just maybe bigger numbers, maybe smaller numbers.
Christian Horner spent about 50 minutes talking to the world's media, having some questions as well. He used the word draconian. I didn't even count how many times, but a lot. Like 20 plus times is, I think, an understatement. But Jolyon, what do you think? What do you think of these penalties? What do you think of the effect that it could have on Red Bull?
Well, it's punishing in a way. The money's fine for them. 7 mil is small fry for Red Bull to pay. The punishment really is going to be the reduction in development opportunities from next year, and we'll only see that really in 2024. So it's going to play out over the long run. I think it's also the first time that we've had concrete numbers from the FIA about what Red Bull have actually done, and I feel like overall it's not as big as maybe some in the paddock were suggesting. 1.8 million overspend, but Red Bull and the FIA have said that actually Red Bull have sort of missed a tax loophole, so it could have been about £400,000 overspend, which, if you take it at that number of what it could have been had they sort of done their books as the FIA thought they were going to do, it's not that big an overspend. And I don't see that it would transform the season last year, to be honest, at that smaller number.
But the argument from the other side then becomes, and that this is what hashtag BBCF1 is full of, is, well, it doesn't matter the size of the overspend. You've broken the budget cut. That's against the rules, and a stronger penalty should be applied. More draconian people want.
And I guess we'll find out really how big a penalty it actually is. Maybe Red Bull have got such a march on the opposition anyway with this stable set of regulations that are staying for the next handful of years.
That they developed during their overspend.
But again, if people are putting their overspend money down to everything, performance last year, performance this year, they are so far ahead of everyone else that surely credit must still be given to the team for wrapping up the championships, both of them, with races in hand. We're only going to find out really if it hurts them in 2024, and they're still going to carry over this advantage probably into next year, and then they'll have the penalty of the reduction.
And we'll have forgotten by 2024 anyway.
Yeah,
to remember to see whether it's changed.
0.25 or 0.5 of a second in lap time. That's what Christian Horner predicted would be the penalty to them. Andrew Benson?
People aren't going to forget this, Jack.
I was being
really
facetious.
Facetious and shocking turn of events.
I mean, obviously it's up to everyone to have their own personal opinion on whether this is a big deal or not. Because already Christian Horner is sort of laying out the ground for excuses, by talking about this tax loophole, trying to talk about it being only a £400,000 overspend rather than a £1.8 million overspend. Of course, the FIA has taken a judgment and said, well, it's 1.8 million and we're going to apply the penalty according to that. All Red Bull's rivals, I know, will point out that if you overspend, whatever Horner says, you do get a benefit in performance from your car. There's no way you get around that, because they could also have overspent on catering or whatever else is listed in the FIA judgment. And when you've already got a credibility problem over one of your world championships in 2021 because of the way it ended with the FIA making mistakes in the application of the rules, in Abu Dhabi in 2021. You then add an overspend in the first year of a new budget cap to your second championship. Whether it's right or not, whether it's fair or not, people will always look at these 2 years and go, yeah, but.
Cars are out on track. You'll be pleased to know that we have another 5 young drivers in free practice 1, but I won't blather on about that. I'll let Jack Nicholls do that instead, and we'll give you a sync-up option as well.
Old man Sebastian Vettel is the first driver out on circuit in his green Aston Martin, and he's wearing his retro Red Bull helmet this weekend, the sort of silver and blue squares, and that says Danke Didi on top, again in tribute to Dietrich Mateschitz, who passed away last weekend. And it looks pretty cool, actually. That's the sort of classic Vettel helmet, isn't it, as he comes around the loop over at the far part of the circuit, and that is at corners 4, 5 and 6, and then through the S's sequence that takes him from turn 7 through turn 11, then into the stadium section, then out over the start-finish straight again. Sergio Perez, as you can hear, makes his way out onto the circuit in the Red Bull. Those drivers Jenny referred to, Pietro Fittipaldi in the Haas, Liam Lawson in the Alfa Tauri, Jack Doohan in the Alpine, and Logan Sargent in the Williams. Those are the drivers that are out on track. Have I missed one? No.
De Vries.
De Vries
in for Russell.
Yeah, but he's an F1 driver, so he doesn't count.
Exactly.
For those of you wanting to sync up, 58 minutes and 26, 25, 24 seconds left on the clock. Do get in touch, of course, hashtag BBC F1. Does this put a question mark over Red Bull's 2 titles, Jolyon, in the way that Andrew sort of suggested?
I think it can do. If people want to look at them and want to question them, then absolutely it can. And it's an unknown, isn't it? Last year, regardless, there's a question mark. It's not even to do with the cost cap. It's to do with the stewarding and the race direction in Abu Dhabi. That is just a de facto question mark. There's always going to be there. The overspend, has it helped them? Maybe, surely they overspent for a reason, but it is not that big a number. But it's not squeaky clean for them to come here and take the second title.
Can I just say, I wasn't saying that as my opinion. I was saying some people will see it that way.
As you had suggested as a possible interpretation.
Exactly. If people want to throw doubt over the Red Bull's championships, they have the opportunity to do that. That's what I would say. Maybe it's not a £400,000 overspend, in my opinion, is not what has transformed this Red Bull car to be a monster that Verstappen's going to win the record amount of races in a season in. I don't think that's the overspend justifies how good they've been. I think that's just on their own merits. But you never can be 100% sure, and so there will be a grey area if people want to pick holes in it.
Also, think it's worth saying nobody else did the same breach that they did. Okay, Aston Martin got fined $450,000, I think it is, for a procedural breach. They were the only ones that got the breach, the minor breach. Every other team in Formula One played by the rules. And I think you have to take that into consideration when you're looking at this.
So if other teams had broken the rules, that would be more fair. Then it would make Red Bull's infringement less of a big deal.
I think the point Jenny's making is that the other teams did their homework and got their submissions right, and Red Bull didn't. So,
we know that because they breached the cost cap.
But for example, one of the things they didn't do was take part in the 2020 cost cap dry run that many of the teams did do. So Horner was saying earlier that we submitted our interim accounts in April 2021 and the FIA didn't come back to us about that, and he was kind of implying, well, why didn't they? That wasn't fair. But you could argue that if they'd done the 2020 dry run, this problem with the income tax write-off that has arisen, which is making the difference between 1.8 million, which was the actual breach, and the 400 and something thousand, which Jolyon's talking about, having listened to Christian Horner. Maybe they wouldn't have done that if they'd done the cost cap dry run.
It is Christian Horner and the FIA in mutual acknowledgement that was something that Red Bull could have done.
Yes, but he's making a big deal out of that, whereas the FIA are taking the opposing view, aren't they, and saying it's 1.8.
But the FIA felt it necessary to point that out in their decision.
Yeah,
so they're not saying it's not true.
One of the problems with that, here's some radio from Leclerc.
We believe we have a puncture.
Okay. So Leclerc's picked up a puncture and returned to the pit lane. None of the tyres that I can see look dramatically down. The rear left appears to be the concern, maybe, but can't spot anything from a quick pit stop, and they're going to now push Leclerc back into the pit lane.
Must be a very slow puncture that Leclerc can't actually feel it. They could just see the pressures dropping on the telemetry at Ferrari, so they've called Leclerc in, and that's actually going to cost him, because that'll be a set of tyres that he won't get back, basically. That's Leclerc in just a couple of laps.
I have no brakes as well. Brakes are completely gone.
Copy.
Now that's the polite way to complain on the radio to AlphaTauri about your brakes. That is Liam Lawson, who is in for this first free practice session. And that's something actually with... who was I thinking about this earlier? I think it was Logan Sargent. It's teammates to Liam Lawson in Formula 2 this season and is third in the championship, whereas Lawson is down in sort of 8th place, and he was sort of Red Bull's young driver of the future for a while, Liam Lawson. So that was another little string to Logan Sargent's bow that I was thinking about during free practice in Austin, but never got round to saying it. 53 minutes and 51 seconds on the clock. Verstappen quickest at the moment on a 1 minute 23.292, 6/10 quicker than Sergio Perez. 1.1 seconds to Pierre Gasly, 1.1 seconds to Hamilton and to Stroll in the top 5. Everybody is out on the hard tyres at the start of this session.
Is it worth saying, just picking up on this brakes issue, it's not just the AlphaTauri who seems to be suffering from it. It's been suggested to me that there might be a whole bunch of brakes that are going around at the moment, a batch issue, and it's to do with the glazing of them, and once they're gone, they're kind of gone. And a few of the teams have been struggling with this, and I think Russell potentially struggled with it in Mercedes. AlphaTauri has certainly struggled with it, and that's what's been suggested to me, that it is a batch issue. Interesting.
Well, need to buy some new ones then. Get a new batch, don't they, old AlphaTauri?
Well, they can't because of the cost cap.
Well, Red Bull have got so many brakes.
Just borrow
you cannot believe how many brakes Red Bull have.
Just as well as their sister team.
Yeah, exactly. So Verstappen quickest, Perez second, Gasly improves to go third quickest.
It doesn't ring true to me, that. Russell definitely had problems with his brakes in Singapore qualifying, and it was wet, and he just didn't get a good feel for the brakes, and possibly that was one contaminated set that could be true. But the rest of them, it is routinely AlphaTauri that are having problems, and we don't hear anyone else really on the radio apart from Russell's Singapore qualifying. He then said on Sunday the car felt much better. We don't hear a huge amount of it, apart from mainly Pierre Gasly. He's been so vocal the last few races, really critical of glazing of the brakes.
What Jenny's referring to is something we heard from a team principal last weekend in Austin, which was a third team, which is separate from Mercedes and AlphaTauri, who was saying, yes, there's definitely this wider problem with brakes because we're having it too. They might not be bleating about it on the radio quite as much as Gasly, but they are having it. They didn't know for sure that it was a batch problem, but that was a supposition.
51.5 minutes to go. Verstappen quickest. Ricciardo jumps up into second quickest at the moment in the McLaren. He was quite... I don't know what the word is. I found him very cute yesterday in the press conference. I know that's a bit of an odd term to use, but it's because he was asked, I can't remember if it was by Tomo or by a journalist, but I think it was Tom Clarkson, and he said, your pole here in 2018, it's a track you've gone well at before, that must give you confidence arriving here. And he just sort of looked sheepishly and said, well, yeah, I mean, normally it would, but nothing correlates this year. Nothing correlates. And it was a really sort of honest and, sweet moment, I thought, which I found very endearing, that he was just like, yeah, you'd think, but nope.
He's just having a horrible time of it. I think he's just a little bit in despair of what's happening. Daniel Ricciardo, another awful weekend last time out in Q1, no pace at all in the race. Maybe he was having some problems with the brakes, but we never found out. But
he was having problems with everything, I think, is the crux of the issue, and he doesn't know what the problem is, otherwise he could resolve said problem.
Are you a bit apprehensive now if you're Piastri? Are you watching this and thinking, I hope it's not just a second McLaren car thing? Or you got confidence that, nah, it's fine, it's just Ricciardo being rubbish?
I think you
must have a little bit of niggle.
No, you have to think that. You have to think, I am that good that I'm going to hop in this and just do the job. And Ricciardo, for whatever reason, he's lost it. He's older, he's just not settled or whatever. He's lost the feel, lost the rhythm. That's what you have to think if you're Piastri. If you look at Ricciardo's predecessor at McLaren, Carlos Sainz, he was doing a consistently solid job. That's what Piastri has to aim for when he comes in. He will be backing his talent all the way. You can see that already from the way that he's handled negotiations this year, that he is a man high on confidence. Yeah, I think you've just got to go in from a fresh start. Don't start doubting yourself before you're even there.
I have to say, looking into the eyes of Daniel Ricciardo last week in Austin after the race, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Daniel Kvyat in Germany in, I'm going to say 2016. Just the kind of shell of a very broken driver who couldn't work out why things weren't going right for him. And Daniel Ricciardo was so honest last week after that race. He just came up and said that, I don't know what to say. And you kind of almost wanted to excuse him from media duties at that point and just go, you know what, don't say anything, just go, because what can you say when things are that bad?
Yeah, it's true. We just got to drive a profile up of Pietro Fittipaldi. His favourite TV series is Peaky Blinders as well. Who was it last week whose favourite was Peaky Blinders, and they had the dogs Shelby and Tommy, or Shelby and someone else? Who was it? It was one of the FP1s. No, I don't think it was Joe. I think it was an FP1. It could have been Sargent. Could have been Logan Sargent and his 2 golden retrievers. Have you started watching it yet, Benson?
No, I've been too busy.
Oh.
I think it was someone whose first language is not English.
Was it Alex Palou?
Maybe it was
it could have been Palou. Could have been Palou. Anyway,
because that's what made it more surprising that they were the names.
47 minutes and 50 seconds to go. I have an American friend called Jimmy, and he has to watch Peaky. He loves Peaky Blinders. He's from California. He has to watch it with subtitles on because he's like, I've got no idea what they're saying. So I go full Brummy like I used to be as a child, and it just confuses him.
Hang on a minute.
47.
Can you go full Brummy now? I don't think I've heard you full Brummy.
I'm not doing accents on the radio.
What, because you never do that?
When was the last time I did an accent on the radio?
Oh, yeah, it didn't make it to air. You just did it in the car all last week.
It was an acceptable accent to do, to be clear. It was fine.
Matthew McConaughey, by the way, was the accent he was doing in the car all the time, and yet you won't bust out an accent now.
No. Okay, that was an impression. I'll do impressions. I won't just do general accents.
Hashtag BBC F1 nominate the impression for FP2 especially, because it's another 1 hour and a half of FP2 tyre testing.
Emails are down, by the way, everybody. So I'm sorry to report f1@bbc.co.uk isn't letting me in at the moment. There's a batch error. Genuinely, so I'm not even joking. Like, that is a genuine computer thing, but it is. But my emails are not supplied by Brembo. 46.5 minutes to go.
Other Formula 1 brake manufacturers are available.
Yes, but don't appear to be struggling quite so much. Now, Gary says, and this is a question actually that's come up a lot: is the fine going to take Red Bull over this year's cost cap, or does it go on next year's? The answer is it's nothing to do with any of it.
Comes out of a totally separate pot, which I still find that strange, because it's just like you're buying your penalty from what's the incentive for others to not go over the cost cap in future years if it doesn't come out of the cost cap budget?
I don't think people will want that a 10% reduction in your wind tunnel. I don't think that's worth $7 million. I don't know. You reckon?
What do you mean?
Well, if the penalty for going over the cost cap is a $7 million fine and a 10% reduction in your wind tunnel time, I don't think you're going to choose to take that. That's not a penalty you're going to choose to take. As in, you're not going to choose to overspend knowing that that's the punishment.
I don't think so. But honestly, we need to see how it plays out. We don't know yet.
It could be worth it potentially.
Potentially, it could be, depending on what the overspend was on, the extent of the overspend, and how significant is this wind tunnel CFD time going to be. We're yet to see. The teams are banding numbers around, But we've got to remember, for the next years, the cars are stable. For this year, it would make a big difference. It was a brand new set of regulations, needs a lot of R&D time. For next year, the regulations are stable. If you've already got a great car this year, you can do nothing to it. It will be competitive next year, and then you get your time allowed on top. Quite frankly, if Red Bull had no time to develop their car, they'd probably turn up next year in an okay-ish position. Do you think? They're probably okay-ish.
Come on, yes.
But they've got their 7% that they're missing.
I think we're under selling the
importance
of development.
Time.
Yeah.
So they'll get 25 runs instead of 28. That's the reality of this, is they'll get 25 runs in a wind tunnel. They lose 3 runs in a wind tunnel, and when they're so good, then you question how much of an effect that'll take. And as you say, speaking to other teams, they've suggested that because the regulations are stable, when you look at years 23 and 24, it's not going to have such a big impact on them.
We don't know. I think this is the truth. We don't know, and we'll find out when we get more into these regs and we see more effect of the wind tunnel time. We'll see next year how well the teams further down can move up. Is everyone going to push together and get towards Red Bull pace?
Well, it's also not quantifiable, is it? Because if they don't win next year, is that because of the aero development, or would they have not won anyway? If they do win next year, is that because of the aero development reduction, or would they have won? It is just impossible to know whether the punishment works. I think that's kind of the hardest thing. You send someone to prison, you know they're in prison. You fine someone money, you know they've been fined. But with this, you give a penalty against the team or a points reduction, you know. Whereas this is such a, and I'm a big fan of the sliding scale of development and all of that. I think it's a cool thing in F1, but it is almost impossible for us to tangibly know how the punishment has worked, basically.
I think the other teams will have the best idea, really, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from them through the weekend. Their opinion on the fine, or the penalty. The fine is an irrelevance.
Emily reckons it was Théo Pourchaire's dogs that were the Peaky Blinders dogs.
Behind on a half lap.
What the debris? Sorry.
So Carlos Sainz thinking there was some debris behind him on an outlap, and maybe not even realising that Nick de Vries was in this session. Here's Ricciardo's radio.
Just had full brake knockoff into turn 10. Felt weird. Just let's check the brakes.
Copy.
And McLaren had to pit Ricciardo in free practice and change his brakes in Austin, and he's just complained of a full brake knockoff. Do we know what a knockoff is? A brake knockoff?
I think it's just when you don't get the deceleration from them. So you're putting the force through it, they're just not working, like a glazed brake. What's weird about this brake thing is it's not drastically changing the pecking order. We're not seeing major inconsistencies of the pecking order if there is a plague of dodgy brakes out there in Formula One. Now, I don't dispute the source of the information, and no doubt AlphaTauri are having problems and potentially McLaren are having problems, and we know that Russell had a poor qualifying. But overall, yes, we're still predicting the same people, and it's lap after lap after lap. Those that go through in Q1 make it through into Q2. There's not just a random element there's in Formula One at the moment.
Also, I swear Mercedes said they'd found the problem with Russell's, and it was an engine overrun after free practice one.
No, there were 2 separate things going on with Russell's car. Also, Hamilton had brake problems in Austin. In fact, they changed his brakes on the grid.
Oh, really? I didn't realise that. Interesting. 40 minutes and 43 seconds on the clock. Verstappen still quickest on a 22.291. 4 tenths quicker than Sergio Perez. 4 tenths quicker, well, half a second quicker than Carlos Sainz. 8 tenths to Valtteri Bottas in 4th. 5th is Pierre Gasly. 6th is Alonso. 7th Ricciardo. 8th Vettel. 9th Norris. 10th Lawson.
Just on this.
No drive for some reason.
Okay, understood. We'll bring the car in the pit lane, please.
No drive for Jack Doohan, and gets wheeled back into the garage. So that's a shame for him. Having completed 6 laps of running, he is back in the pit lane in that AlphaTauri. about a second off Pierre Gasly at the moment. Andrew?
Just on this aero reduction thing that you were talking about, and Christian Horner was saying earlier, and of course you can take with a pinch of salt what he says or not, depending on what you want to do, but he was talking about that aerodynamic testing reduction being somewhere between 0.25 and 0.5 of a second of lap time, compared to what they would have put on the car anyway. To put that in perspective, Mercedes this year are 3/4 of a second off Red Bull on average in qualifying. So even applying Horner's data, Mercedes still aren't catching up with Red Bull on that basis.
Yeah, I don't think that makes sense as a thing. I get where you're coming from, but I can't. You're talking about an average, and we're talking about a season in which Mercedes have got closer to Red Bull. No, but
have they?
I'm asking you. You're the one with all the numbers.
So, difference to fastest in the first half of the season for Mercedes, 0.812 seconds. Difference to fastest in the second half of the season, Mercedes, 0.737 seconds.
What, 0.7 is the closest they've been in qualifying?
No, it's average.
Right, but average whatever. What was the how far?
Average whatever.
How far away were they in Austin in quali?
Less than that.
Yeah.
5 tenths or 6 tenths or something.
Yeah, so take off 0.5, it's close.
But that's only Austin.
Yeah, I know.
The whole point of the average is to give you a complete
but Austin
picture.
but Austin is the most recent race, and Mercedes are getting closer to Red Bull.
Well, they did in Austin, but it was a track that was supposed to suit them.
I take your point, but I'm being annoying to illustrate that I'm not quite sure that's how that lap time would work.
I'm not sure it's how it'll work either. I'm just trying to add a bit of extra perspective into the whole debate about it.
No, and it worked.
Thank you.
It worked. We've got 38 minutes and 15 seconds to go. Everybody back in the pits now, bar Stroll and Lawson. So the full order is thus: Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Bottas, Gasly, the top 5. Vettel, Alonso, Ricciardo, Stroll and Norris, the top 10. Lawson, Hamilton, Zhou, Latifi and Doohan, the top 15. Schumacher, De Vries, Sargent and Fittipaldi, the 19 drivers to have set the lap time. Leclerc got a puncture after 2 laps, so came into the pits in his Ferrari. He has now gone out on a set of the soft tyres. So he's the first driver to go out on the softs. Everyone else has been running the hards, and once again looks as though Mercedes were doing some longer race running, I should say. And as a result, they are 2 seconds off Verstappen for Hamilton and 3.7 seconds off for Nick De Vries. Sainz only 3 tenths away from Verstappen at the moment, who's the top of the times. We'll see when they go out, and if they go out on some soft tyres.
Just thinking back to what Christian Horner was saying in his very extended and protracted press briefing after the news of the cost cap and the ABA agreement, he was talking about the wind tunnel. And he was saying how bad it is, basically, that it's an old military base one. It's from the 1950s. It's when it's raining or when it's cold or whatever, they suffer from the extremities. And I was just sitting there going, hang on a minute. This is one of the most successful team in Formula One this season. And they are one of the most forward-thinking teams in the world, with a huge amount of budget going into this operation, and he's there kind of citing this kind of decrepit military base wind tunnel and sort of saying, oh, poor us. Why haven't they got a better wind tunnel? Like you talked yesterday in the previous show about Audi coming in and the fact that they'll use the Sauber wind tunnel in Hinwil because it's so amazing. This is Red Bull. Surely their wind tunnel cannot be that bad.
Well, I've never been in their wind tunnel. I've never been in a wind tunnel.
Never?
Honestly. No, I've never been in a wind tunnel. Have you been in a wind tunnel? Where have you been in a wind tunnel?
I've not been in the wind tunnel, but I've been by the wind. Like, I've had a good mooch around the wind tunnel. I've just not stood in it.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah. No, I didn't mean like in it and they turn it on.
Woohoo! My husband has been in the wind tunnel.
When they turned it on?
Slightly envious. They didn't turn it on. It'd be like squishy.
Leclerc goes quickest on a 1 minute 21.546, 7 tenths quicker than Max Verstappen. That's the first lap on the soft tyres. But yeah, well, there were because there've been wind tunnel reductions for a good few years now, hasn't there? There've been restrictions on how much wind tunnel time you have and stuff. So
yeah, on the time that's used. But look at McLaren.
I guess the capital expenditure maybe isn't worth it.
Well, they've got the money.
Gary with the reciprocals.
Sainz went over some curbs and got asked to check the car. Oh, he had a big slide coming into the S's sequence of corners, had a bit of opposite lock and bounced over the curbs through turn 11. But yeah, I've never been to Red Bull's wind tunnel, and also there's a lot of CFD these days. But obviously, it's not quite Virgin and that whole Nick Worth plan in 2010, but I don't know. But
McLaren talk a lot about their infrastructure, the way that they're growing as a company. And they talk about this new wind tunnel that they're developing, and they're very excited about it. They think it'll really drive them forward within the championship. And I just found it a real curiosity. Yeah, just an oddity for such a high-tech team. Maybe they rely on Adrian Newey and his sketchpad, and so they don't need it because he's just an absolute genius when it comes to drawing on an easel.
Yeah. Schumacher's on a lap at the moment on the soft tyres in the Haas. He's just coming out of turn 11 down towards the 90-degree right-hander of turn 12 that takes him into the Forosol baseball stadium with all three sides surrounded by huge packed grandstands, and emerges out of that now, flicks into the final corner at turn 16, accelerates through turn 17, which officially is called Mansell, and then he does a 1 minute 21.9, 4/10 slower than Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. So that suggests plenty more time to come for Leclerc, but he was only on his first real lap when he did that run. Was Leclerc on his 1 minute 21.5, 4/10 quicker than Schumacher. Then Verstappen, Perez and Sainz the rest of the top five. Bottas is heading out on softs, as is Vettel at the moment. 33 minutes to go.
Schumacher in the fastest final sector of anyone, basically quicker than Leclerc, and the soft tyre obviously finding a heap of time over the hard. Do you want to know the oddity about this session so far? Everyone is running the same tyres.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone went out on the hard tyres for the first runs. Now they're all switching to the soft tyres.
Dirty track here in Mexico City, only used I think twice a year. Maybe there's a World Endurance race, but I don't think there is any more, so it's only Formula E and Formula One that race here in the middle of a fairly polluted city, in the middle of a park, so lots of dirt gets blown onto it, so maybe the first half of running not hugely relevant.
Yeah, my interpretation of that, Jolyon, would be, and tell me if you agree, would be that most of them are thinking we're not going to be using the hard tyres that much this weekend, therefore we'll get them out of the way, ruin them on the dirty track, and save the ones that we do want, the softs and mediums, for the rest of the weekend.
That's pretty much why they run FP1 tyres anyway, is the ones that they don't want for the rest.
So Schumacher's found about 3 seconds compared to his hard run.
And that's kind of the proof then. Huge track evolution, although Perez has gone in too hot for turn 1, missed the apex slightly on his first lap on the softs. Some cheers from the crowd as they see Perez flying around, opens the DRS on his Red Bull down towards turn 4. Track evolution is it's always a big thing anyway. On any circuit, the first run of FP1 is a sighter. It's not really a great chance to get straight in and hone the setup, particularly on a circuit like this or a street circuit that's not used very often. It will be slippery, and then added that when they're all on the hard tyres, it'll be minimum grip for them so far. So there's big chunks to be found on the softs now.
Perez has abandoned his lap after that mistake at the first corner, so he will go again in a couple of moments' time. Bottas has gone second quickest, 4/10 slower than Leclerc, who did improve to a 20.7. So that is the pace time there for Leclerc. Not a huge amount of support racing this weekend in Mexico City. There's some GT racing and some Formula 4, and that's it.
Well, it's meant to be W Series.
Yeah.
So no W Series.
So therefore, it is really F1 that are the only things cleaning the track, really, and putting down any grip of note. Norris coming through the final corner now didn't look very nice through the final turn, and goes 3/10 slower than Charles Leclerc in the McLaren, quicker than Valtteri Bottas. Schumacher 4th, Joe in 5th, after a frustrating... It was such an up and down race for everybody in that top group, wasn't it? With in terms of the midfield pack of McLaren and Alfa Romeo and Alpine. Alonso did get his 7th place back. If you haven't listened to any output since the end of the Grand Prix and now, basically nothing's changed. But in the middle, Alonso got given a 30-second time penalty, and then it got taken away again. But no, it's all fine. 30 minutes and 20 seconds to go. Perez pushing again.
Daniel Ricciardo currently in the pits. The team have said that he does have a brake problem. They are investigating at the moment, but that's going to cost him a little bit of time. He's done 9 laps so far.
30 minutes and 5 seconds on the clock. Perez is pushing in the middle sector. Vettel and Alonso are pushing too on their soft tyres. Perez coming out of turn 11 now, down towards the Foro Sol, through the middle sector, and he's 2 tenths down on Charles Leclerc. Turns it into the right-hander of turn 12, and then the slow sequence of corners inside the stadium. His teammate Max Verstappen keeps out of the way as he gets cheered out through the final few corners and out across the line. Don't think this is going to be quicker than Leclerc for Sergio Perez. It isn't. He's 4 tenths down on the Ferrari driver. Alonso's putting in a decent lap here. He comes out of the final corner. Vettel comes through first and goes 5th quickest, followed by Alonso, who comes across the line and goes up into 2nd place. A 1 minute 20.902, just a couple of tenths slower than Charles Leclerc. Verstappen is now starting a flying lap down through turns 1, 2 and 3, then the little stretch towards turn 4.
Some good laps from the midfielders, aren't there? Alonso and Norris both ahead of Perez on their first run on the soft. Here's the sound of Max Verstappen coming down towards turn 4, down to 3rd gear, left, and then a very slow right, which leads you into a 180-degree, even slower right-hander. Turn 6 and then 7. Now you're leading up to the fastest section on the circuit, flinging through a load of S-bends. Still quite slippery out there. Verstappen correcting a little bit of a slide in towards turn 8. The midfielders
He's gone. He is fully gone, Verstappen. Spins it around, doesn't hit the barriers, but that was... that's what you call a tank slapper. It was gone one way, it was gone the other, it was gone back the other. I thought he'd held it. He had not.
That was a 3-point spin there. Almost looked like it was going the first time, then almost looked like it was overcorrected, and then I think it was the overcorrection of the overcorrection that finally caught Max out there. Almost one of the most miraculous saves there on his soft tyres, pressing on through those S-bends, that in the end it just got away from him. It was already getting a little bit twitchy through the first part of these S's, and then he just comes off the curb at the second part of it, the right-hander, and just spat the car. The grip level very low, and it was just quite bouncy coming off the curb on the apex curb that Verstappen had, and it was just slinging around on him.
It's unbelievable. I couldn't correct it. So little grip.
He nearly had it on that second one. That would have been mega.
It would have been remarkable if he had kept that full lock stop, trying to keep it going in dry conditions. The slides come at you that bit quicker in the dry as well. You don't see too many saved like that, and we have not seen one today. Just got away from him in the end, but didn't hit the wall. He probably will have damaged that set of soft tyres, though.
I was going to say, I have a feeling those tyres might be going back. He'll have flat spotted those in a horrible way. It'll be like driving on 50 pence pieces.
Well, he actually didn't spin at that high a speed in the end.
You think his tyres will be all right?
Because he's only run the hard tyres, and he hasn't got another set to run on. He might try and run them again. He didn't come back in the pits at the end of that lap. He's stayed out there. We'll only get a gauge on it when he tries to do another flying lap, which will be on the next lap. Because it wasn't that high a speed spin in the end. By the time he'd had 2 massive slides left and then right, he had scrubbed a fair amount of speed. When you do a high speed spin, that's when you're panicking, especially when you think you might hit the barrier. You just plant your left foot on the brakes and stop it as quickly as possible, which inevitably puts some level of hole straight through the rubber, and you get a flat spot. There won't be a great nick after that, but he's carrying on driving for now.
26 minutes and 10 seconds on the clock. Carlos Sainz has gone faster than Charles Leclerc across the line. A 1 minute 20.707, 400ths quicker than Leclerc. Alonso is 3rd, Norris is 4th, and Perez is in 5th position. And then Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly, Sebastian Vettel, Zhou Guanyu and Mick Schumacher the top 10. Gasly had quite a bit of traffic, I think finishing his lap.
What was this guy? That was Latifi.
Yeah, very good job, Nicholas.
So Pierre Gasly annoyed at Nicholas Latifi, who held him up into the final corner. 25.5 minutes to go, and Joe is parked at pit lane exit, and I'm not sure the engine's running, honestly. And yeah, Joe's lost drive in his Alfa Romeo, parked at the exit of the pit lane. And so we'll see whether that brings out a full court. The cars can get past him, but it's the kind of thing that might bring out a little red flag or something, or virtual safety car.
They can push that back. He's not gone beyond the edge of the pit wall, so they can push that Alfa Romeo back, and it won't have to go too far back as well to get to their team.
I can't upshift. I switched my engine off because otherwise it get too hot.
So Joe unable to upshift. The team are there now at the end of the pit lane, but I think he's past pit exit line, isn't he? So I don't think the mechanics will be allowed to go out there sort of without permission, as it were.
I think the marshals have to push it back to the point where the team can then take over and push it back further.
Perez on a better lap. He's improved in sectors 1 and 2. He's coming into the stadium section now at the Foro Sol. Slows it down for the right-hander at turn 16 and then comes out across the line. And we'll see what sort of lap time this is for Perez. He goes third quickest, so that's a little bit better. He is a tenth of a second down on Carlos Sainz, and Verstappen comes across the line to do an identical time. Perez and Verstappen, within the space of 2 seconds, do an identical lap time to the nearest 1,000.
So his tyres were okay then, Max, for another lap.
Yeah.
Same 1,000 as Perez, and that then was his first flyer put in with the fastest final sector of anyone on that lap as well. He already had the fastest first sector of anyone, so the sectors are kind of there for Verstappen, but he lost a bit to Leclerc in the middle part where he had his spin on the last lap. Now the marshals can push Zhou's car back towards the Alfa Romeo team, and we're not going to get a yellow or a safety car or anything for that. The FP1 drivers are pretty much all at the bottom of the times again. None of them have run the soft tyres in anger yet. So we've got Lawson actually ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who's on an outlap on his soft tyres in the Mercedes. So Lewis has had a low-key first run. You've got Lawson, then Doohan in the Alpine. Quite interested to see what he can do in this session. Alonso's flying in the other Alpine, still within 2/10 of Sainz's pace in fifth. De Vries, Sargent and Fittipaldi rounding out the order.
Fittipaldi, I think, has had a spin between turns 2 and 3, and he's pulled over at the side of the circuit. So maybe a breakdown actually for Fittipaldi, because he's pulled his visor up and is in an odd position. So I would suggest that Fittipaldi has broken down in the Haas, and the red flag is out. 22 minutes and 35 seconds on the clock.
He's on an outlap as well, so he's only just come out of the pits as Fittipaldi, and then pulled it straight over.
Has a Formula 1 race under his belt, doesn't he, after filling in for Romain Grosjean? Two actually, good point. 22 minutes and 16 seconds to go, and Fittipaldi is climbing out of his car, so that is his session done. Mick Schumacher's up in 12th place at the moment, 1.2 seconds away from Carlos Sainz.
He was slightly frustrated, Pietro, that he wasn't racing this year as the reserve driver of Haas. Remember back in February time, when Mazepin was chucked out from the team along with his backing. Then there was a space just before the Bahrain Grand Prix, 1 week of testing, 3 days of testing, and Haas went back to Kevin Magnussen instead of putting Pietro Fittipaldi in the car full time.
Not been much chat of Fittipaldi in for next season either.
And I think the same reason as they opted for Magnussen over their reserve driver is the reason why he's not going to come back. They basically don't want to give him the seat. Good for a reserve driver. They like him at Haas. He's a very friendly chap. He did okay in those 2 races that he did, alongside Magnussen there, replacing Grosjean after the big fiery crash of Bahrain. But not in contention for next year at Haas, and we're still waiting to hear who is going to get that seat.
He did actually, I remember that actually, he did well. He did a lot better than I thought he was going to do.
The expectation was that he would struggle because his junior career is not all that outstanding. This is the sound of the Haas car coming down to turn 1.
Stop the car, pull over and stop the car, please. Stop the car immediately.
Mark Slade on the radio telling him to just stop it. Oh, that's because there was a puff of smoke out the back of Fittipaldi's Haas.
There goes that Ferrari engine, potentially, as Fittipaldi jumps out the car.
I feel like they've got through a lot of engines down there. And I know Ferrari have struggled this year with their engine, with reliability. They bought the fix in America for Leclerc, but they couldn't run all of the fix for some reason, so they're going to try and run it again with the full fix this weekend. But I was just going to try and look at how many engines they'd used, because to me it seems like an awful lot, and I'll just pull up the document that tells me how many in this very slow running Wi-Fi. How many have they used? So Magnussen's on 5 internal combustion engines, and Schumacher on 5 as well. There are some teams on 6. Bottas, for example, also running a Ferrari engine. 5 for Zhou, 6 for Tsunoda, 6 for Renault as well, for the Alpine team. There's a lot. And Leclerc on 6 now as well. Meant to be 3.
Quite interested in Hamilton and De Vries at Mercedes in this session. De Vries on the grid next year with AlphaTauri, of course, having had his debut, an outstanding debut in Monza. 3/10 down on Hamilton on that first run on hard tyres. They both did a number of laps. Lewis, as I said, was just on an out lap when that red flag came out. In fact, he just started a push lap, but didn't manage to get a sector on the board.
Feels like it's been quite a common approach this season for Mercedes to do some proper high fuel running at the start of FP1. Feels like something that they've, while Ferrari and Red Bull are kind of swapping times at the top, it feels fairly usual that Mercedes are kind of lurking down there, and we don't see anything from them until the end of FP1.
They've only run the hard tyres, so if there's a big offset between the hard and the soft, they can find a heap of time. On the hard tyres, it might not have been so disastrous, but because others have popped on the soft already, down in 16th and 18th, it just looks like they're messing around on heavy tanks, which maybe they are anyway.
Well, because Hamilton was 2 seconds off the Red Bull of Verstappen and Perez when they were all on the hard tyre.
Just a point, they were meant to be running this new front wing this weekend that they've been developing at Mercedes, and it was in the pit lane for the US Grand Prix, and I had a good old look at it, good nose around, and it kind of had these black joins that were quite thick on the top element. However, they've now disappeared, and so the FIA had a look at it, and I think they deemed it to not be within the spirit of the regulations. And Mercedes play things by the book most of the time, I think, so they've removed those elements, and the wing is a new wing, but it's not got the developments on it that they hope they'll be able to use this weekend.
My understanding of that wing, you're right, they've taken off the support bits on the sort of top flaps, during the top flaps, because people, the interpretation wasn't the FIA, I believe, it was another team that was complaining about that wing, unsurprisingly. The support structures created outwash, and outwash they're trying to get rid of in these new regulations. I think Mercedes feel that they can take those bits off and it not really affect the performance of the wing. So they may well still run it this weekend, but you're absolutely right. It won't have those little joiny bits on that do the outwash. But the performance of the wing, they think, should still be more or less what it was before.
Green light at the end of the session, and straight out onto the circuit goes Sebastian Vettel. Loves being first out today. Little quiz question of the day. Fingers on buzzers. Draconian. We've heard draconian a lot. What's the etymology of draconian? Who's that referring to? Does anyone know?
Dracula, of course.
No. No one.
Is that the klaxon?
No, it's not a klaxon, but we should definitely start doing that. He was the first recorded legislator of Athens in ancient Greece, Draco was. He replaced the prevailing system of oral law and blood feud by a written code to be enforced only by a court of law.
Okay. Did you expect one of us to actually know that? That's ridiculous.
I had high hopes, honestly.
I wish I'd known that, because I really would have liked to, but no.
I honestly had high hopes.
I have trouble remembering my PIN number, let alone that.
I think if Stephen Fry was a Formula 1 commentator, he might have got that wrong, but he's not, unfortunately.
He might have done.
Pete knew it. Are you serious? Pete, our sound man, knew it.
You should have piped up, Pete. I'm sure there's a way that you could have spoken to us on air. Surely, you're in charge of the sound.
So 15 minutes and 42 seconds to go. Producer Paddy's not here this weekend, he wouldn't have known it. I know, I honestly thought one of you might, because you've got a bit of ancient Greece in your locker, Palmer, haven't you?
Oh, I'm a fan of the classics. Classics, but that's a bit niche, isn't it?
You got a bit of Plato knowledge?
Yeah, Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah, see? So that's why I thought you...
Classic philosophy.
Might. 15 minutes and 15 seconds to go.
Or Jason Plato, you were meaning?
Yeah, retired from the British Touring Car Championship. His last race the other week at Brands Hatch.
What a career.
He's only won 2 titles.
No.
He only won 2 British Touring Car titles in, 2001 and about 20... What? I want to say... I don't know. I want to say 2008 or something like that, but I don't know.
Just ask Pete.
A wide-spanning career to try and guess another year out of.
Yeah, I know.
About 25 years?
I'm sure it was 2001. Or was 2001 James Thompson? Anyway, no, 2001. Nailed it. 2001 for Vauxhall and 2010 in the Silver Lion Chevy. So all that time he was racing with Matt Neal, he never actually won the title. When he was in the when Neal was in the Honda and he was in the Seats, he never actually won the title. 14 minutes and 20 seconds on the clock.
Most race wins in BTCC history, though.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe even most entries in BTCC history.
I would expect so.
Yeah. Starts 659 starts with 97 wins. Only 2 titles from 97 wins, though. He's the Alonso. He's the Alonso of British touring cars. Loads of wins, not as many titles as you'd expect.
I think he's more Alonso than that as well.
Do you think
a little bit troublesome.
Do you think Alonso has that many wins? It's 32, isn't it?
Yeah, 32.
In
That's
his career.
That's 2. You could have won every race for 2 seasons and have 32 wins.
I don't think that's that big a number.
I think 7th in the all-time list is a big number in anybody's book.
For someone with 2, Häkkänen's got like 12 or something and 2 world titles. Maybe not 12. I'll look it up.
It's 20-something for Häkkinen, I think.
It's been a decade since his last, almost. Coming up to a decade. That's a long, barren spell for Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, so Häkkinen, 20 wins, 2 world titles. Alonso, 32 wins, 2 world titles. I think that's a lot of wins. Win to title ratio is not good from Alonso.
Well, it's because he's been so close on so many other occasions. Missing out by a point in 2007, a handful of points in 2012 and 2010. He's been the nearly man since he took his 2nd title in 2006. He hasn't been the nearly man for about 8 years now, but there was a time where he was your plucky runner-up for many a year with Ferrari.
Verstappen now 33 wins, is it?
Yeah.
With his 2 titles, he just overtook Alonso.
Yeah, well, that's true. But yeah, true.
Don't give me that. Oh, more races.
More races.
More races.
More races.
Echo.
Stu G says, as well as... No, I don't even want to. As well as being a bit of a run, and Draco went on to run a team in Formula 3000 and gave Ricardo Zonta his big break. But I think that might have been a different person.
Avoid short shifting.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible?
So Alonso being asked to avoid short shifting, he says it's impossible. Hamilton across the line on the soft tyres and goes a tenth slower than Carlos Sainz. The top 6 are separated by less than 0.2 of a second here on the soft tyres. Admittedly, there's been track evolution, but Sainz, Leclerc, Perez, Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso separated by less than 0.2 at the moment, with Bottas best of the rest in 7th, 8th for Norris, 9th for Gasly, 10th for Vettel, Joe, Stroll, Schumacher, Latifi and Ricciardo the top 15. And then, Ricciardo downwards of only set times on the hard tyres. Ricciardo, Lawson, Sargent, Doohan, De Vries and Fittipaldi, though that will change soon because Ricciardo is out on softs.
Yeah, he had brake issues. That's why he hasn't done so many laps. And Fittipaldi looks like they're going to have to replace their engine in the Haas. Gunther Steiner saying that. So that's the end of Fittipaldi's session, and that's Magnussen's car. So once again, they're going to have to do a quick switcheroo. They're getting used to it in the Haas garage. They had to do the same for Schumacher with gearbox, didn't they, last time out?
I always feel like they're up against it. Do you remember Magnussen in FP3 before qualifying in Austria? What was that, 2019? And they managed to get him out and then he qualified 5th or something. It was really a remarkable effort from the Haas gang. 10 minutes and 55 seconds remaining. So Carlos Sainz still quickest. Ricciardo improving, as I say. Through the first sector, he's half a second away from Carlos Sainz. Some Checo fans.
So De Vries isn't getting a set of soft tyres at Mercedes. He's back out on the hards. Doohan is in the pits in the Alpine, who's only running the hards. Sargent's only run the hards, and Lawson's only run the hards. So none of them are going to get a fair crack on the soft tyres, which is similar to what we saw last week in Austin for the FP1 drivers. It's a bit of a harsh break. Great that they get to drive the car, but F1 cars in FP1 on hard tyres are a long way from how they should feel.
The only one I'm surprised about with that is Sargent. If you're planning on running him next season, everyone else is a bit of a... It's not a pity drive, but you know what I mean, is we have to do it, so we'll send them out and we'll use them for data. We're not actually here to sample their driving credentials. Whereas Sargent, you'd think you'd want to kind of give him as, you know, knowing that he's in for next season if he achieves the amount of license points, you'd want to get him up to speed a bit more, I think.
Yeah, I spoke to Logan after his run in Austin, and he was saying he found it really tough to find confidence to get in the rhythm, and he was a fair chunk off Alex Albon, who was in the car alongside him in Austin. And it is difficult when you're only on the hard tyres. In Austin, there's a load of high-speed corners, which was the biggest gap, I think, for not only him, but most of the FP1 drivers, just feeling the downforce of these ground effect cars. They are really quick through those high-speed corners still, and that's a big step up from Formula 2, which is what Sargent and plenty of the other ones are driving at the moment. And coming to Mexico, a track that's inherently low grip, it's very low downforce just because of the altitude, and then you only run the hard tyres. Again, not a confidence booster at the moment for a driver that has no previous record in Formula 1. Unlike De Vries, hasn't done a race, hasn't done any other FP1s. He's getting his first taste of it, and it's right in at the deep end for Logan Sargent, compared with Latifi, but of course Latifi's 1.3 seconds up the road, having run a soft tyre.
Doohan's done as well, and they've had to stop the car for a precautionary reason after seeing anomalies in the power unit data, so his sessions ended early. And I was also going to say, why don't they just give them an extra set of soft tyres for this session? If you've got a young driver coming in, give them a set of softs, which aren't from the race allocation, and just let them go out there and put in a fast representative lap. I don't get it. I sometimes think that this whole mandate to have a set number of tyres and the set selection of tyres for each team now, mandated by Pirelli, is somehow a bit backwards.
What, so you think the FIA should give them an extra set?
Yeah. No?
Yeah.
It doesn't affect their weekend. OK, they get a bit of data from it, but then everybody has the same amount of drivers going out through the year.
No, it's up to the teams to run them. The teams have the tyres. They can choose to give them to the FP1 drivers as they would the race drivers, but they're just choosing to favour the race drivers getting back in for FP2, where even though there's tyre testing, they will have a free choice and will run the tyre test from Pirelli, but then also have the soft tyre that they've had left over.
Carlos Sainz quickest at the moment. Charles Leclerc second. Perez is third. Verstappen is fourth. Doohan's had Lawson's had a bit of a moment at turn 4, but has carried on his way. Hamilton has returned to the pits, having not improved on his second run. He did do another push lap, but then I think bailed out of it towards the end and came back into the pit lane. 7 minutes and 12 seconds on the clock. De Vries improves, but he's still on those hard tyres and does a 24.5 and is 3.8 seconds off the pace for Nick De Vries. They are the same set, so he has run the same set of hard tyres the whole way around. And Hamilton in fifth is the only driver in the pits actually at the moment, apart from Doohan and Fittipaldi. Well, Fittipaldi's not in the pits, but those are the only two not on track. So interesting that Hamilton's come back in after 17 laps. Just getting a look at what happened to Liam Lawson coming down into turn 4. Big lock up on the left front and straight on. So fairly standard stuff for error-wise for Liam Lawson. And just having a look at Max Verstappen coming into turn 5, the slow right-hander and the back end trying to get away from him there as well in sort of the laziest possible way, but he managed to save that one at least.
On the lock stops again though. I think his right hand came off the wheel as he tried to search for enough lock to save it there, Max, through turns 4 and 5. Just really limited grip out there on the circuit. Verstappen was back on the hard tyre now, having done his best lap on the soft. A lot of long runs going on. Data gathering, not particularly fascinating to see, but what we can still see is the drivers just pushing on and trying to feel their way around. It was Lawson who had the lock up into turn 4. fairly run-of-the-mill. Just he's also searching for a reference on how hard you can brake, and these Formula One cars, particularly with the high altitude and the downforce level. Verstappen's just been the driver slinging his car around, making a few mistakes, over the limit of grip a couple of times.
Ferrari 1-2 at the moment, but as I say, less than 2 tenths separating the top 6. Perez and Verstappen on identical lap times in the Red Bull.
Just spoken to Mercedes about Lewis Hamilton. No issue for him. He's going to be heading back out onto the session soon as just over 5 minutes left.
Yeah. Sainz has done a lot of laps this session, 24 for him. Alonso's done the most on 25. And then the fewest is Ricciardo on 15 of those that are still running. So Daniel Ricciardo, the fewest laps.
Saw someone on social media pointing out the fact that Carlos Sainz had run the track yesterday. And at this point in the season, it's relatively unusual for the drivers to be running the track. They normally save their fitness for other places than the circuit. But it was suggested that because he hasn't done many laps in the last couple of races, he might just have wanted to get out there and get some fitness altitude training, always handy. And I was like, what? That can't be. But it's nice to see him running the track.
I think you're going to say he just wants to get another lap in.
Yeah, I thought that's where you were going as well.
Didn't get many in Austin.
Success.
Yeah,
he got a whole lap in. It's good stuff.
And then Russell ran him wide.
Did you run the track? Oh,
of course.
Lawson has had has he had a moment or a breakdown? He's on the inside of the left-hander of turn 13. Looks as though he's pulled over, I would suggest, unless he's spun it through 12, which isn't unusual, but he's not in a position that suggests a spin at turn 12. Red flag is out, and that might be the end of the session, and it's looking pretty toasty, that car.
Those brakes are going to be on fire very, very shortly, unless they can get... Well, the car's not going to get moving again to get some airflow over it. The left front particularly is billowing out smoke now. Quite a hard circuit on brakes, a lot of big stops. You don't get a lot of airflow over them, and now Lawson has stopped, getting Zippo.
I'm surprised he's not moving faster to get out of that car. If I saw that much smoke coming out of my car that I was in, I'd be like, OK, I'll just evacuate quite quickly. He's still standing in it.
It's not on fire yet, is it? It's just a bit smoky.
Yet, being the operative word.
Yeah. So Lawson hops out of the car. There we go. There's a bit of flame on the front left now. Lawson well clear of it as he's parked up in the Foro Sol. The marshals come out with a fire extinguisher. Pull the pin, son. There it goes, and cools down or extinguishes the brakes. But if that is a full-on brake issue for Lawson, then that's not going to be obviously great news for AlphaTauri, considering Lawson complained of the brakes on his outlap, didn't he, I think? So,
and he's just had a big lock-up.
Yeah.
And gone through the runoff area at turn 4, maybe just struggling more and more with the brakes. The way that the car's pulled off, it looks like a reliability thing rather than a spin
for sure.
From the driver. But what has stopped it? Presumably not the brakes being the issue that stopped it. They've just been cooking, and then he's parked up, and then they've really overheated.
The problem is they didn't stop it. The brakes weren't stopping it. And that's why he stopped it. Getting a replay of Lawson at turn 12. No brakes, I would suggest. Or no drive. Not sure.
Mate, what's going on?
Stop the car on track. In a safe place, stop on track.
Sounded a bit more engine-y than anything else.
With no brakes, he would get round. The brakes wouldn't make him stop on track.
I know. I know. But what did you make of that one? Session will not be resumed, by the way.
Yeah, it sounded like it was the car was almost wanting to stall on him. Like he lost the engine as he was coming into to that corner into the stadium.
So, red flag, end of the session, and that is the conclusion of free practice 1. Ferrari 1-2 again, as it was, as they were quickest in Austin in both free practice sessions. They've started it here. Sainz quickest, Leclerc second, Perez third, Verstappen fourth, Hamilton fifth, Alonso sixth, all separated by less than 0.2 of a second. Then you've got Valtteri Bottas in 7th place, 8th for Lando Norris, 9th for Pierre Gasly, and 10th for Sebastian Vettel. Ricciardo in 11th, Joe in 12th, Stroll 13th, Schumacher 14th, Nicholas Latifi in 15th spot in the Williams. And then you've got the...
Just wanted to quickly use this moment to thank everyone for the past 3 years and the opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nick. Good job.
And best luck for the future.
Lawson, Sargent, De Vries, Doohan and Fittipaldi, the rest of the drivers. But yeah, De Vries thanking the team for the last 3 years. That'll be his last track action, I suppose, as a Mercedes driver.
Are we surprised that he's actually driven this session for Mercedes, given he's signed for AlphaTauri for next year?
Who else? Who would you have put in?
Maybe Stoffel Vandoorne. I guess he can't drive because he's done 2 seasons of Formula One.
Gutierrez is their other reserve, and I guess he can't.
He's done too much Formula One as well.
They got no one else in their books apart from putting in effectively a driver this time for Red Bull now.
Yeah, seems so.
He's been drinking a lot of coffee and not doing very much else when it comes to sessions. And I suppose can you blindfold a driver to a point when they're out there and not tell them what the plan is? You just send them out, they drive around in circles, come back in, don't debrief. They'll want debrief from him, though.
What's the point?
Well, they have to. They have to put him in the car.
They don't have to put him in the car. They have to put someone in the car.
Are you
Piastri is not driving the Alpine, is he? Jack Doohan is driving
it. He's not allowed to do it either.
Maybe just a slight oddity.
Stick some hards
Mercedes
on.
putting in effectively a driver that's just signed for the Red Bull squad.
Yeah.
So that is the end of free practice one. Lots of reliability issues. Is that altitude related? Is that the cars just, we're at 2,200 metres, it's coming towards the end of the season, Friday running, power units just going pop?
All of it. End of the season, trying to eke out the mileage in an FP1 session that counts for very little in poor track conditions. Then you've got the altitude, you've got cooling being an issue. And all of it means that reliability is a concern, particularly at this point. Probably later on as well on the tyre test. I imagine there's not going to be much point in putting in a good new power unit or gearbox or anything at this stage.
So slow puncture for Charles Leclerc right at the beginning of the session, so didn't seem to inhibit him too much. He still managed to get a second place. A brake issue for Daniel Ricciardo and McLaren. Doohan had a power unit issue. He was in for Ocon at Alpine. We saw the fire at the end for Lawson. He was in the AlphaTauri for Tsunoda. And power unit being replaced in Fittipaldi's car. He was in for Magnussen down at Haas. So a lot of mechanics going to be feeling the pain of this and extremely busy. What we also saw, Jolyon Palmer, was Verstappen getting sideways on at least a couple of times.
Yeah, one big spin, wasn't there? Big spin in the higher speed sections through turn 9. Nearly had a spin at the low speed as well later on in turn 5. Even the champion is having some moments out there. Just grip was so poor. It will get better. Everyone will get more honed in. The track grip will come up through the weekend, particularly with an hour and a half of Pirelli tyre testing later on. So it is the worst conditions that we've seen. But it was nice to see the drivers having to really hustle the cars around a bit.
Something else we saw earlier on that I don't know if we've seen before, Christian Horner in glasses. Someone pointed that out on hashtag BBCF1 and just bespectacled. And I've just had a quick search. I can't find any evidence of Christian Horner bespectacled before.
I don't feel like he's ever had to read anything to us before, in fairness. He's always just talking to us.
Oh, because he was reading the statement, yeah.
Maybe it was his responsibility to find the tax loophole. Missed it. He's gone to Specsavers.
If you do want to hear more about Christian Horner, Red Bull, cost caps, maybe even you want to hear about Alonso and Alpine and all of that stuff, then make sure you listen out, because we have a 5 Live programme for you at 9 o'clock tonight. So 1 hour's time we will be doing that on 5 Live, and we will be hearing more opinion from the box as well as previewing Mexico. Jack, what can we expect from this Grand Prix weekend? What do you reckon? I mean, we've had 1 hour of limited running.
Looks close. All you can say from this first hour is it looks pretty close with Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes in there with Hamilton. And Hamilton did a slightly different run plan too, so I was going to say we'll see what free practice 2 brings, but
not a lot.
Maybe we won't.
Russell needs a decent weekend, doesn't he, to regain some confidence when it comes to that car? He just looked out of sorts in America.
He's not had a good run of it recently. Missing FP1 won't be a great help. The other driver that's not had a great run of it recently is Ocon as well. Actually had a good run in Japan, but apart from that, he's been a little on the slide, and he missed FP1 in this session as well. They'll need to get some good mileage in FP2, but they've got the hour and a half and an extra set of tyres to use, so should be all okay for those guys.
Yes, should be. So we finished the session with, as we said, Sainz and Leclerc on top. Perez getting faster than Verstappen. He's going to have an immense amount of support here, Jack. The crowd will be desperate for him to better his podium and actually win this race. Has he got a chance?
He's in the fastest car, so you'd think so. It just depends what Verstappen could do there, because is he going to beat Verstappen on pace? No. but he's got a shot of getting involved in the fight towards the front, and a Red Bull 1-2 I think would still be a pretty popular result in Mexico City.
Verstappen was actually asked if he'd pull over and let his teammate pass so he could get the win in front of the fans at Mexico. 3 guesses what Verstappen said?
Maybe. Have I got another guess?
Go on then.
Yes. I've got one more. No.
He said he doesn't need my help, which I thought was nice. Right, BBC F1 will return in 1 hour on 5 Live, and then we'll be back again for free practice 2. It is the tyre test, so an hour and a half of pure, unadulterated joy. We will speak to you then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.